We're working on a cool card effect for cards in a background. So you can see the background changes to the same as the background of the card. We're using font family Poppins for this. And we've got just a few, we got a div class quote within our body. And then we have a div class of box. And then a class for each of the boxes, box 1, box 2, and box 3. Within that we have some text, paragraph, H2 header for person making the quotation. And we have one more div with a class of background. That's because when we hover, we're going to have to change the background, and that only works if the element you're changing is a child of your parent element. Okay, this is the HTML without any styling, so we'll get right into styling that. Start with a basic reset, and selecting all our different elements: padding 0, margin 0, box sizing, border box. All right, so for a body, we're going to do display flex, justify content center, align item center, and minimum height 100 viewport height. Font family, we're using Poppins. And for the weaker browsers, sans serif. Okay, cool. Now we're going to first off we're going to style our quote class. Define the entire thing as being a width of 1,200 pixels, minimum height of 400 pixels. Display flex, justify content space between. All right, so we've already spread out our different cards on the screen. And now we're going to define each and every box, separate boxes, with the relative position, a width of 360 pixels, and a height of 400 pixels. We're going to give them all a white background and a hidden overflow. We'll get to why a little bit later. Transition 0.5 seconds, z-index 2. That we're bringing it forward, so it's over our background elements. Padding of 30 pixels, and we'll just add some box shadow. Okay, cool. Very cool. So next thing we're going to style is what happens when we hover over our box. So first thing we're going to change is the box shadow. Okay, so that it grows just a little. And we'll style the paragraph, just change our font size to 18 pixels. And change our header so the position is absolute, and we put it at the 30 pixels from the bottom, 30 pixels from the right, with slightly larger font size, 20 pixels, and uppercase. Okay? All right. Okay, so now when you hover over the box, we're going to change the font color of both header 2 and the paragraph. We're just going to change it to white. All right. So when we have a background color, you'll see that. Now we're going to style our background. This is all the backgrounds for the quotes, and we're positioning them on top of the entire page. So position absolute, top and left 0, opacity. This is an important one, opacity 0, because we're just going to make it appear when we hover. It's important to understand we got a few backgrounds running, so we're going to make a different one, opacity 1. Otherwise they'd hide each other. So what we're doing is when we hover over box 1, we're going to change both the background element using the symboling to select another child within the same parent, that's not directly after it. And we're also going to affect the box. So we're going to we're going to change opacity to 1 and make the background a linear gradient to these two colors. Okay, so you can see when it's selected, both the background of the card changes and the entire background changes. Now he's going to repeat the process for box 2 and for box 3, just changing the gradient each time. All right, and one more. And there you go. All right, we got 3 different cards. Our linear gradient effect. One more thing we're going to do is we're going to create a before element for all the boxes with an empty content string and a before pseudo element, and position absolute, we're going to put it top 0, left 0, left minus 50%, and a width of 100%. So it's just the left half of the box. The height is the same as the card, and we're just going to change the color of that. Give that just a dark gray color. So you can see you have just a slight deviation of color in the card. So the left side of the card is a lighter gray. And we're going to create an after element, which is for our quotation mark symbol in the bottom right corner. And we're going to do that using just an image, a PNG image of quotation marks, and position it absolute and a little bit from the bottom, and push it over to to the right. Just to put it on the bottom right with opacity of 1 and the same background color as our before element. Okay, the invert just shows the opposite color. So our quotation marks were white, and by using invert 1, these change from white to black. And by adding 0.1 opacity, it fades to a gray. Okay, really not actually a very noticeable difference, but it's just a cool function to know, the invert function. All right, now one more thing. When we hover over the box, we're going to take our after effect and we're going to turn off the invert. Okay, so you just see that when it hovers, the quotations also change slightly. Yeah, you don't even need that, but it's there. So there you go. There you have it. All right, guys. Take care. Hello there, and welcome to another lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be doing cards. We're going to do cards that have a expanding title and a fading background. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We have a link to our Poppins font. We have a div class container that contains 3 cards. In each card, we have a div with a class box, a div with a class image box, an image, and a div class content with a h3 element and a paragraph element. This is what it looks like before we style it. So we're going to get right into that. We're going to perform our basic reset and change all our padding and margin to 0 and box sizing border box. We're going to use display flex and justify content center and align items center. Now we're going to set our minimum height to 100 viewpoint height. Our background to a dark grayish blue. And we're going to be using font family Poppins, or as I like to say, sans serif for all the weaker browsers. Alright, now the next thing we're going to do is style our container class. I remind you this is for the div that contains all the cards. I'm going to give it a width of 1000 pixels. I use a flex display, and that'll line up all our cards next to each other. Justify content by the space between, which automatically sets the margins. And we're going to now style our box with position relative, width 300 pixels, height 400 pixels. This sets the size for the dimensions for all our different cards. Our background black, which will be what's under the image, and a box shadow, a slight box shadow underneath, just to give it that cool 3D effect. All right. We still got to get our title in the right place and our text in the right place, but one step at a time. Now our image box. Now, I remind you, this is an image box that contains, this class contains within it our image. We're going to set its position to absolute, just to get it on top of our card. And top 0, left 0, width 100%, and height 100%. Okay. Great. Now, by doing that, we've allowed the text, the content part, to take the space, which was occupied by the image. Now we're going to style our image. Same thing, position absolute, top 0, left 0, width 100%, and height 100%. And we're going to add a transition of 0.5 seconds. Now we're going to apply a hover effect to our image that will change its opacity to 0, meaning the image disappears and what's left is the black background. Now we're going to just modify our content within the box, set its position absolute, 20 pixels from the bottom and 10% from the left. Give it a width of 80% and a height of 80%, 60 pixels. Sorry. Give it a white background and overflow hidden, because we're going to have a lot of text spilling out and we do not want that to show. Add 15 pixels of padding. We want to, let's see, I want to give it some space from the right. Alright, forgot to add percent to our 80%. Great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply a hover effect to that. So we're going to change its width to 100% and its height to 100%. So when we hover over the box, then our content, the div or the class content, which contains within it the paragraph and the header, will cover our black background. All right, you see. Now we're just going to add some delays to the text just to make it look a little bit better. So to our header, we're going to change the font size to 20 pixels. And with our paragraph, we're going to add a bit of a margin just to give it a little bit of space from the other element, the header. And we're going to change its opacity to 0 and line height to 1.2 EM. That just pushes it, that and the margin, push it out of the frame so that you don't see it when it's just the title. Add a transition to 0.5 seconds and text align justify. Okay. Right, now I need to add a where was I? We're gonna add a hover effect to our paragraph as well, so that it appears in the opacity 1, and give it a transition delay of 0.5 seconds. So when we hover, it takes a moment, and then the text appears. But no, I forgot to add the transition delay to the title. to our content box so that it will grow instead of just appear. So I'm going to add a transition of 0.5 seconds. And there you go. So now you can see our title grows in to cover the card. Card fades to black. And our paragraph text appears. Awesome. There you have it. Any questions, feel free to ask. And I'll see you in our next lecture. Take care. Hello guys, and welcome to another lecture. Today we're going to be doing cards with a appearing text and a circle clip path on our image. Create a cool hover effect. What we have here is a class container that has within it 4 different cards, each one with a div class of box, within that an image, and a class of content that has a h2 header and a paragraph of text, and at the bottom an anchor tag with a read more link. Alright, let's have a look at that before we start. We're going to change the display to flex so we can have them side by side, and a lot of things. Alright, we're going to do our basic reset to our CSS. Just change our padding and margin to 0, and our box sizing to border box. And we're going to define our body as a display flex, and justify content to center and align item center. Right, we can see that we've centered our different elements, and we're going to apply a min height of 100 viewport height. We're going to be using font family Consolas. We're going to define our container, which contains the 4 different cards, and give it a width of 1,200 pixels, and a display flex, and flex wrap. Alright, we haven't seen the change yet, because we still need to apply or justify content space between, which it automatically defines the margins between the different cards in our element. Now I got to define our container box, which contains both the image and the text, and we're going to define it a width. By defining it a width of 280 pixels and a height of 400 pixels, we'll now have enough space in the screen to show them side by side. Exactly. Great. Now overflow is hidden. You'll see why in a bit. We're going to style our image box, the box that will contain our image. We're going to give it a black background and a clip path of circle. So we're creating a big circle, 400 pixel circle, at center 100 pixels, so it's actually bigger than our card box, and so you can't see it because it's behind it. We're going to apply a transition of ½ second and transition delay of 0.5 seconds. Okay, so it's still invisible, you can't see it. Now we're going to add a hover effect to our image box so that our circle shrinks down to 80 pixels at center 150 pixel with a transition delay of 0 seconds. All right, so you can see that our circle shrinks to display just part of the image. Now we're going to modify our content within the box. This contains both the h2 header and the paragraph. Set the position to absolute, left to 0, and bottom to 0. Width at 100%, and height at 55%. We're going to give it 20 pixels of padding and text align center. By defining our height at 55% and our bottom is 0, that's what sets the text below the part of the image that we want to display. Now we're just going to remove the underline from our link at the bottom, from our read more, with text decoration none, set the background to black and the font color to white, add 5 pixels of padding, and set the display to inline block. I'm just going to add a bit of a margin from the top, 15 pixels, to give it some distance from the paragraph. Right, now what we're going to do is, because we're going to apply a hover effect to both our link, our header, and our paragraph, we're going to set, we're going to define it before the hover effect as invisible, opacity 0, transition of half a second, and transform translate Y of 20 pixels. So it's invisible and it's a little bit lower than what it's going to be with our hover effect, so that the effect shows it coming into the screen, into the card. And we're just going to copy out each one of these to prepare for our hover effect. And what we're going to do is we're just going to change the opacity to 1 and have a slightly different delay on each one of the elements to create a one after the other visual effect. So yeah, so what we're going to do, I'm going to set our opacity to 1 and translate Y back to 0. And transition delay, we'll set a different one for each one of our elements. So 0.5 seconds, 0.7 seconds, 0.9 seconds. We'll save that, have a look. Cool, there you go. You can see our box image shrinks and our text appears gradually. And there you got it, cool cards. Alright, hope you enjoyed the lecture. See you again next time.